Hi everyone. This week's parasha is Parashat Bamidbar, and we are starting a new Sefer Bamidbar. In this week's parasha, we have the counting of Bnei Israel. We have the way that Bnei Israel camp in the desert, and we have the counting of the Leviim, and we start to go into the jobs of the families of the Leviim. When Bnei Israel camp in the desert, they camp in 3 concentric squares. Can you use concentric when it's not with circles? I don't know. 3 concentric squares. In the very middle of the camp is the Mishkan. And then there's a bigger square outside that is the Leviim. They sleep around the Mishkan. And then there's the bigger square of Bnei Israel sleeping around the Leviim. And the Leviim need to sleep around the Mishkan because they need to protect the Mishkan. Having the Mishkan amongst Bnei Israel all the time is a huge responsibility. Hashem's presence is always in their midst. And so the Leviim are protecting the Mishkan from Bnei Israel because in Perek Aleph it says, the stranger that comes close will die. And so I read this pasuk and I got a little bit upset because that means that if I'm from Bnei Israel, I can't come close to Hashem because I'm considered a stranger and Hashem doesn't want that. Hashem's gonna kill me. And I was feeling a little bit annoyed until I got to Perek Gimel. And in Perek Gimel, we were speaking about the jobs of the Leviim. And in the Leviim, there are 3 families, Gershon, Kehat, and Merari. And Kehat has the holiest job because they need to carry all of the kelim. They carry the Mishkan, the Menorah, and the Shulchan, and the Mizbeach. And here's what it says in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Yirche. Al tachridu et shevet mishpachot ha-Kehati mitoch ha-Leviim. The family of Kehat shouldn't be cut off. And if you do these things, they'll live and they won't die when they come close to the Kodesh. And then Pasuk Chaf, when they won't see the holy and die. And so now the restriction of coming close to Hashem does not only apply to Bnei Israel, it also applies to Leviim. But they're with Hashem all the time and they have to carry the kelim. So how does that work? I think that this idea of Hazar HaKreb Yumat and Sheva Kehat needing to be careful teaches us a very important lesson about our relationship with Hashem. Our relationship with Hashem has boundaries. You can't just do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. You can't just go into the Mishkan because you feel like it, right? We have the Leviim protecting it. And if you're Sheva Kehat, you can't just carry the menorah when you feel like it. There's a time and place for you to do that. And I think the biggest example of this, of Hazar HaKreb Yumat and having restrictions in our relationship with Hashem, is Nadav and Avihu. And I know that it's not in the Sefer, but Nadav and Avihu brought an Esh Zara. Nadav and Avihu are Kohanim. They're the sons of the Kohen Gadol. If there's anybody who has the closest relationship with Hashem and who can always be close to him, you would think it's the Kohanim. And yet, they bring an Esh Zara. They brought a Korban that Hashem didn't want. And Hashem killed them. And so you can't just do whatever you want in your relationship with Hashem. Even if you're the most important person, even if you're the Kohen Gadol, you still have restrictions. You can't go into the Beit HaMikdash whenever you want. You can't go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim whenever you want. Only one day a year, right? And so we shouldn't feel restricted by the fact that we're Bnei Israel and we can't go close to the Mishkan. No. Everybody has restrictions in their relationship with Hashem. And so our job is to learn how to connect to Hashem in the way that He wants. Hashem doesn't work for us. We work for Him. And so we need to develop our relationship with Him in a way that's good for both of us, in a way that's within our limitations, in a way that Hashem wants. And if we figure out what Hashem wants and we do what Hashem wants of us, and we learn how to connect to Hashem through the appropriate channels, and we don't go outside of our zones, and we don't go in places that are off limits and use off limits things to connect to Him, then we can have a healthy, good relationship with Hashem. And so things that we need to work on, something that we should work on this week, is figuring out the ways that Hashem wants us to connect to Him and using those, right? And not being the stranger in our avodat Hashem, not being the stranger in our service of Hashem. So may we all find the appropriate channels to connect to Hashem and not go out of bounds in our relationship with Him. Shabbat Shalom.